Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Richard Fleming. Today is Monday, the 27th of February, 2023. Only a couple days left before the end of our 38th month of the SARS-CoV-2/COVID-19 pandemic and the consequences we've been addressing. Almost a month ago, I had an interview with Carlos Sanchez and Via Telegun from Grupo de Control in Spain, where we were talking about the viruses, the vaccines, the origin of these viruses, and all the consequences that go around it. Yesterday, that interview was released, as well as the actual written version of that uh, interview that was released in a Madrid, Spain newspaper. Two major points that came out of that I would like to address today have to do with the Furin Cleavage site and Department of Defense funding of the Ukraine for COVID-19. The first point had to do with a late in the first half of the interview discussion about the well-known now Furin, F-U-R-I-N, cleavage site. And the interviewer had submitted the material and information I'd provided previously to a number of researchers and only received one negative response, somebody who actually suggested that perhaps the actual Furin cleavage site could have come from an animal because there was a cat, feline coronavirus responsible for a feline or cat infectious peritonitis or an abdominal infection. And I have gone to great efforts to look through the literature. I'm going to share my screen with you here for a moment as we begin the discussion of these two topics. This shows a research paper talking about mutation of the spike protein and the cleavage site. And this is the classic Furin cleavage site that people have talked about. However, the amino acids that are present in these feline coronaviruses are not the PRRA or proline, arginine, arginine, alanine amino acids of the Furin cleavage site of the SARS-CoV-2 viruses. If we scroll through this paper, we can see that what they refer to as a Furin cleavage site, in fact, doesn't have that PRRA insert. There's a lot of RRAs with the amino acid S or followed by the amino acid S, but there are no PRRAs. In fact, this shows the actual percentage breakdown. None of these feline coronaviruses, despite being reported as the possible same, none of these have the PRRA, Furin cleavage site. And as we scroll down, we can see more than that they looked at. This would be the site of the Furin cleavage. There are no PRRAs in this Furin cleavage site. So for topic one, this rebuttal that other coronaviruses have this PRRA insertion, it has no scientific basis in it at all. This much touted feline coronavirus does not have that. The second topic had to do with funding by the United States Department of Defense. And if we go here to this site, you can see by looking at the very top here that this is the USA spending.gov site. And you will see the Department of Defense has paid out a substantial amount of money to Black and Veatch special projects with major headquarters in the United States in Shawnee Mission, Kansas, and Dallas, Texas, where I live. This information, when we scroll down here, shows that the subawards, if you actually looked at these right here, this line here, 19-6192, went to Labyrinth Global Health, whose primary headquarters are in the United States, the Congo, and Ukraine. These two grants were issued on the 12th of November, 2019, one for $399,511, specifically to provide and documentation of COVID-19 research. This is 7 weeks before the pandemic was even known. We began discussing the virus. And again, a second one also on the 12th of November for $50,000, a task order. Now, in response to that, there was a published by Lead Stories rebutting the state people that have been talking the DoD actually funding Ukrainian on COVID-19. The response by Lead Stories fact checkers is that as we scroll down, and I just see that it's actually here because transparency, here's the funding I just showed you. And here is the state going to read. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, contracted with Black & Veatch to continue to support Ukraine's peaceful and safe biological detection and diagnostic capabilities and to reduce biological threats, whether they are naturally occurring, accidental, or intentional, through the provision of equipment, supplies, and training. Black & Veatch signed the MSA with DTRA on 2 October 2019 to modify DTRA's request non-COVID training support, which was submitted to the procurement system on 12 November 2019. After the pandemic began, the MSA was modified to provide additional COVID-19 pandemic-related support to Ukraine on 25 April 2020 and again on 12 June 2020. You're going to want to write those down because those are important dates. The task order directed the servicing contractor to provide high-level subject matter expert mentorship support on COVID-19 laboratory diagnosis, biological safety, and laboratory emergency response in Ukraine. So they're telling us that, no, the DoD didn't provide COVID research back in November of 2019. Rather, this was because they updated in April and June of 2020 any funding for this. However, if we go to this same website, you recognize this. This is where we were. This is the DoD funding. And if we stop at the contract activity, you can find that time zone of April to July of 2020 right here. These are the dates. And if we stop on every one of the dots, well, this is December 2019. This isn't that funding, and it goes to training for someone else in the amount of $0 for this group. But if we track back here, what you will find is none of the contractual changes that occurred in the contract activity, which the Department of Defense and U.S. government provides on their website. None of these have to do with the Black & Veatch funding to the Labyrinth Corporation, Labyrinth Global Health, on the 12th of November for COVID-19 research. So either twice, the Department of Defense and the U.S. government on its spending site failed to include on the contract activity these changes that they state, that the fact checkers state they were told by the DoD, or didn't happen. Either way, they probably shouldn't be running our military, because if they're sloppy enough to omit two significant pieces of information when the website has places for them to include it. This is March of 2019. This is August of 2019. August 2019. December 2019. March 2020, July 2020, July 2020, the documents aren't showing any activity on either the 25th of April 2020 or the 12th of June 2020. The fact checkers didn't check their facts. They took the DoD and the US government at their words, and their words are not backed up by documentation showing that there was some change to the wording of the grant or redistribution of monies to the grant. The 2 points: the Furin Cleavage site that exists on these SARS-CoV-2 viruses do not exist in any other coronavirus on the planet. And that the US Department of Defense in November 13 or 12th of 2019 issued monies in excess of $400,000 to the Ukraine through the Labyrinth Corporation. And that money was for COVID-19 research and documentation, 7 weeks before anybody knew of these viruses being out. The people that work with me asked me to make one additional statement on the record. Somewhat reluctant to do it, but I'm going to do it because they've asked me several times. I'm not suicidal. I have no health problems. If something happens to me at this point in time, and I've put the information out and stored it in several different places, but if something happens to me at this point in time and it looks like an accident or suicide, you might want to dig deeper. This is Dr. Fleming. Today's the 27th of February, 2023.